Hi, my name is Jennifer Palmer, and this is my presentation on the LGBTQI older adults. A few things to think about. What challenges do you think affect the LGBTQI senior population? There are quite a few. I know when this topic came about, I can think automatically off the top of my head just a few barriers that are posed to the community, only based off my knowledge of what barriers are for the LGBTQ population in general. The second thing to think about is how can we, as social workers, as community providers, how can we improve the quality of life for LGBTQI senior community? So just a few things to think about as I go through the presentation. So here's the overview. So for some individuals who don't know what LGBTQI means or what it stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex community. So I will be using the acronym throughout the presentation. So one thing to think about is that the senior LGBTQI community is very large. It is over 3 million folks in the US, and that number is constantly growing as people get older. The more numbers that will go into that 3+ million. There are various barriers in regards to this population, unfortunately. One of them being stigma and discrimination. A lot of people in this community do face that based off their sexual orientation or gender, identified gender. And so that's a major barrier that affects this community. The second one is reliance on family of choices. So a lot of folks in this community may not have a biological family due to their sexual orientation or their identified gender. So what they decide to do is to have family of choice. So people in their lives that they consider family, which may not be biological. The third barrier is unequal treatment under the laws and programs. So unfortunately, a lot of the laws and the policies that are in standing now do not have the LGBTQI community included in their laws and policies. So that is a major challenge for this community. So due to those obstacles, those barriers that I mentioned previously, this community faces quite a few unique challenges. One of them is being reduced financial security. Again, because of different laws and policies at a state and federal level, a lot of people in this community do not have access to those benefits. And because they do not have access to those type of benefits, they face a great challenge of being financially insecure, so faced with poverty and whatnot. The third thing is reduced health and healthcare. So because of the stigma, because of discrimination that they've endured for a large majority of their lives, a lot of folks do not have access to healthcare. Or don't want to have access to healthcare based off their past experiences, which will then lead to declining health for these folks. It says here that there's, because of the discrimination, that a lot of people have distrust with the services that are provided to the LGBTQ population. And then the third thing would be reduced social support and community engagement. So a lot of folks in this community are isolated and they lack a social support network and they lack community engagement. A lot of them are not embraced by the overall elderly community, and so they tend to just be on their own. They disengage from the larger elder population. So the code of ethics, social justice, and so that's the value. The ethical principle is social workers challenge social injustices. So the LGBTQI senior population is a marginalized community. And again, as mentioned previously, they lack access to services and resources and justices at a higher rate than their heterosexual counterparts. So this community, although in general, the elder community, they do face a lot of challenges and barriers. Unfortunately, the LGBTQI population faces those challenges even greater. And so, as a social worker, we are to have that comprehension that this community faces those injustices. So the second ethical standard is cultural awareness. It says social workers should have a knowledge base of their clients' cultures and be able to demonstrate competence in the provision of services that are sensitive to clients' cultures, to differences among people and cultural groups. So it's very important that cultural awareness. So when social workers are engaging with this population, to understand the population that they are working with, to understand their barriers, to understand their specific needs and whatnot. So how can you address the issues? So the first issue is financial insecurities. So advocacy efforts on a state and federal level is very important to do in order to change the financial status of this population. So some of the issues would be with Social Security, pension, IRA, those type of institutions would need great advocacy efforts in order to make a change. So that's policy work. Policies need to be changed. So the second one talks about advocacy, how we should inform folks about their rights and make sure that they are asserting those rights. So basically, in a nutshell, basically self-advocacy, definitely having folks advocate for themselves as well as be aware of their rights and to enforce them. And then the last thing is just informing the community about the importance of financial planning, essentially. So that would include estate planning, creating a will, creating a living trust, and creating a payable account on death account. So the last one there, so a lot of these policies does not recognize same-sex couples or marriages. So in order for folks to be financially stable, a lot of times people in this community have to do extensive financial planning to ensure that their partner is financially secure. So one of those ways is to have a beneficiary on a bank account. That way, on the person's bank account, when they pass, the beneficiary will then be able to have access to all of the funds that are in the bank account. So that would create kind of a safety net for folks to access funds when it's needed after their spouse or significant other passes. So health and healthcare. So what we can do is just provide resources to clients about the different physical and mental health providers that provide care specifically for the LGBTQI community. Although all providers should be well versed in providing care to the LGBTQI community, that is not the case. So to definitely link this community to specific providers that work specifically with this LGBTQI population would be helpful in order to increase access to healthcare and to overall increase one's health status. The second one talks about sharing information with providers and colleagues about how stigma and discrimination negatively impacts the physical and mental well-being of LGBTQI population. So a lot of folks may not be aware of how the discrimination and stigma affects people in this community. So awareness is important. So as a social worker, to provide information, to provide knowledge is important. That way people are aware of the challenges and can fix them. And the third thing would be to provide trainings and literature to providers on how to provide LGBTQI affirming services. So that would be specific LGBTQI trainings, specifically for folks within the elder community, just addressing specific needs, wanting to make it so that it is LGBTQI affirming. So creating a safe space and competent services for these folks is very important. And then social support and community engagement. So again, providing training is very important in literature. People having knowledge of how to provide these services and is important in creating change, positive change. Creating warm and inviting spaces for LGBTQI seniors. That's very important. A lot of folks in this community, again, have experienced very negative experiences with providers, whether that was using incorrect pronouns or not acknowledging spouses or significant others, different types of documentation that was not LGBTQI friendly. So definitely creating a warm and inviting space for these folks would definitely have more people want to be more engaged in the resources that are in their community, and then would then ultimately try to increase their quality of life. And then the third one is just encourage your seniors to engage in community events. That's very important. Within this community, again, isolation is very prevalent. And so to have folks engage in community events can help them bring more awareness to their population, also helps them get engaged with other individuals. So the relevance to social work on a micro level. So it's important that this is very relevant to social work in regards to cultural competency and embracing diversity. So it's important to understand that this population is very vulnerable. And so when engaging with folks, just understanding the various challenges and barriers that they are faced with. Also, as a social worker, understanding that this population has unique needs and experiences, just to help these individuals process their experiences and encourage them to change their behavior. So a lot of people are not accessing resources. They are experiencing financial restraints, and they are not engaging in their community. So helping these folks by with processing their experiences and helping them to change, to alter their behavior. That way they do go out and they do engage in the community. They do access resources that may be available to them is important. So just taking the time to understand people's unique needs and their unique experiences, and then also in motivating them and encouraging them to change. Also, social workers would help, again, these folks access and link to community resources. There may be resources that folks in the community are not aware of, so to bring awareness about the resources can help them improve their quality of life. Also, another thing that social workers can do is to recognize people's support systems and, again, their family of choice. So understanding that a lot of people in this community may not have children, they may not be connected or connected with their